The Podium Pod is brought to you by The Pick and Roll. Head to pickandroll.com.au and subscribe for in-depth commentary and analysis on Aussie hoops. We're also brought to you by FBL, Fantasy Ballers League, an Australian baller lifestyle brand that aims to provide you with classics on and off the court. FBL makes a bold statement in its distinctive white, black and gold colours, with products ranging from basketball shoes to apparel, accessories and more. Be bold with gold. Check out the FBL collection at fblsport.com today. And don't miss the Boomers versus the World games this week, as the Australian Boomers play a series of warm-up games in Melbourne and Japan in preparation for the upcoming FIBA 2023 World Cup. These games will be live and free on the Nine Network and Nine Now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Podium Pod, the podcast covering the 2023 FIBA World Cup across Japan, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Adam Webster with you once again, and I'm joined by my Clutch Radio colleague and NBL.com.au's Tom Hirsch. Tom, a late night podcast for us tonight. You've just come out of the Brian Goorjian press conference post the Boomers' victory against South Sudan. They jump on a plane to Japan tomorrow. We thought that 13 players would jump on that plane. That's actually not the case anymore.
Yeah, sadly not. Only 12 will travel. Jock Landale's ankle injury that I should add was suffered on his left ankle, which was not the one that he'd been ailed by earlier in the week. Seems to be quite serious, and he will not fly with the team tomorrow. He will get an MRI to determine the extent of that injury. But the way Brian Goorjian was talking in the press conference, he is not expecting to have Jock Landale for the entirety of the tournament. And therefore, the other 12 players in the squad are his roster at this stage that he's preparing to move forward with, and that includes Jack White, Dyson Daniels, and Chris Goulding. Now, the caveat to that is, depending on what the MRI shows tomorrow, if it's less serious than initially thought, if there's some positive news, then it's going to, and they think Jock can actually contribute during the tournament, then it'll be a decision between Chris Goulding and Jack White for that last spot. And the determining factor there will effectively be they'll need to see Chris Goulding get through a practice and hopefully suit up in the practice game against France on Sunday. And if he looks all right, he will be in the roster, and Jack White will be the one who misses out. We're told that Jack White was informed last night that he was currently the 13th player in the pecking order heading into tonight's game. But obviously that all changes with the Jock Landale injury, and at the moment, Jack White is part of that 12-man roster that Gorge is planning to move forward to. So, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but obviously changes the dynamic of this team quite significantly.
Dramatically. We'll just talk about the injury itself. It really looked like Jock knew as soon as it occurred, probably running on adrenaline more than anything else, got him directly to the locker room, but he didn't go anywhere close to the bench. It's almost like he had an inkling that it was bad enough that there was no, immediate physio that he could get. He had to go directly to the trainer's room and get it looked at ASAP. And that was the takeaway for me.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. He got up and he basically hobbled directly to the nearest tunnel, which happened to be behind the South Sudan bench. And you knew that he was in a lot of pain, and he knew it was pretty bad right there. And then the replay obviously looked like a very, very serious roll of that left ankle. And, we can only guess by the way Gorge is talking that this is one that's, a multiple week recovery and too risky to move forward with him in the roster at this stage.
And really important to re-emphasize that this is not the same ankle that's kept him out of the previous two games. So this is a freak accident at the end of the day. This is not a consequence of bringing him back too early or anything like that. This is just really, really bad luck on the part of Jock and the Boomers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not the same ankle at all, which was obviously everyone's initial thought. Yes, you're right. It's just a freak occurrence, and really unfortunate because not only would Jock Landale have loved to have been in the team and was really looking forward to it and has stepped up into kind of being almost part of that leadership group.
Yeah.
But he was a really key part of the Boomers' plans, and obviously was going to be the starting 5-man as he was through the latter stages of that Tokyo campaign, when he stepped into the lineup in place of Aaron Baines. So yeah, a big loss for the Boomers, and in terms of not necessarily what they can achieve, but the way they're going to achieve it now definitely changes.
And I think it's a testament to this squad that we've always spoken about how deep it is, and Duop Reith has demonstrated over the last 3 games that he can be, a really potent offensive threat with good lead guards like Josh Giddey on the team. I mean, another 15 points this evening, but a huge opportunity for Duop Reith. It's a next man up mentality in the Boomers, as it always is in professional basketball, and Duop Reith has the opportunity to stamp himself as, the 5-man for this tournament and help Australia make a very deep run, as they have always intended to.
Yeah, and he's been fantastic in that role this week. He started out of necessity with Jock sitting out those first 2 games, and he's been probably the most productive Boomer, save for Josh Giddey, through the course of these 3 games this week.
Yeah.
Just been consistently solid in the right spots, contributing, scoring on the interior off pick and roll sets, getting active on the O boards, knocking down the 3 ball, holding his own defensively, being strong on the boards. He's a good communicator. He's well liked amongst the group. He has no ego as well. So really playing that role beautifully, but he's going to need some help. I mean, he can't be the sole 5-man, and that's going to mean that Xavier Cooks is going to play a feature role in some backup 5 minutes. Nick Kay is going to have to play some backup 5 minutes. And this is one thing that Gorge really emphasized in the press conference tonight. They're going to have to play a lot of small ball, and that's going to mean that various guys will play the 4 spot between Kay, Cooks, Jack White, Joe Ingles, Matisse Thybulle, even Josh Green at times potentially, or Dyson Daniels. They're really going to utilize a multitude of different variety small ball lineups, because that's what is kind of a necessity now with the removal of Jock Landale from this roster.
And you have to look forward to the group play, and particularly the games against Finland and Germany. Finland have Lauri Markkanen, who is, I guess, a bit of a smaller 4 and can play the 3 at times, so not as much of a concern. But Germany with Daniel Theiss and Franz and Mo Wagner, they've got a lot of size, so that's a more concerning matchup for the Boomers than it was 24 hours ago.
It really is. And this is something else that they actually asked Gorge about, because they've got 2 practice games coming up when they get to Japan before their first game against Finland, and they're against France and Georgia. And if you know anything about those lineups, Rudy Gobert, obviously the starting 5-man for France, but they have a multitude of other really big bodies on that roster traditionally. And then Georgia has some size with our boy Goga Batadze as well. So this is going to be a really good test, and Gorge emphasized the importance of those 2 games to really figure out these small ball lineups and what combinations and rotations are going to work for them, and how they can utilize that to their advantage, because they're going to have to try and outrun teams now with some speed and quickness and versatility, because they're not going to be able to battle and contend with them on the interior now as much with really just Duop as a traditional 5-man on this team.
It's been really interesting to watch this team have to work through problems over the course of this week, and we have to, at this point, talk about the loss to Brazil, as we haven't brought you a show since post the Venezuela game. But, it seemed like the offense was really stagnant in that game against Brazil, and it seemed like today, in the first quarter, there were patches of that against South Sudan. Now, it seemed like they got out and ran a little bit more than they have in the previous games, but is it a concern for you, the lack of fluency to the offense over the last couple of games? And do you think that's something that they will try and address through playing faster?
Look, I wouldn't call it a concern. It certainly didn't look good last night against Brazil. And you're right, there were patches tonight where it was a little bit clunky as well. But I think they figured out some things tonight. And I think some of the things that really plagued them and hindered them against Brazil, they've started to iron out a little bit tonight. And yeah, some of those small ball lineups really didn't work against Brazil, but I thought the ball moved a lot better tonight. They got better looks. They figured out the zone defense a bit more, and that really troubled them against Brazil. But also defensively, they played with a greater intent and came out with more intensity from the get-go. They didn't come out kind of half asleep like they did against Brazil. And I think they learned that you can't do that in international play. You can't take a possession off no matter who you're playing against. You have to come out strong right away and try and set the tone, especially if you're going to be playing with some unconventional lineups and size combinations. So I think they'll be better for tonight's game, and they'll certainly be better for the 2 runs they have when they get to Japan against France and Georgia. But they still do need to just get a bit crisper and sharper, and as you mentioned, a little bit more fluid as a unit on both ends of the floor, really, with those smaller lineups.
I must say, watching the Brazil game last night and seeing us go down by double digits in the first quarter, I was almost a little bit thrilled because it really felt like there was a complete walkover against Venezuela. It was clearly really easy in their game in Cairns, their closed door game as well against the University of Houston. So to see them have to overcome that adversity was really important, I think, across this week, that they had to come up against challenges. It reminds me of former UFC fighter Forrest Griffin, who said, I have to get punched in the mouth to realize I'm in a fight. And it seems like the Boomers got punched in the mouth against Brazil last night and realized that, hey, this isn't going to be a cakewalk. You know, group stage isn't going to be easy. Second round's not going to be easy. And we're going to have to really bring our A game every single minute on the court at every time. And you're right, it did look like they figured some things out. Now, were they against opposition that wasn't on Brazil's level? Yes. So that's probably the only thing that you would like to see, a really strong performance against a France, even though they're not necessarily going to be showing their best stuff. I think the Boomers have an opportunity to kind of put the rest of the world on notice in that practice game, come out firing and have a really strong showing. Doesn't have to be a victory. It's a practice game after all, but you know, if we can show more fluency and if we can show a greater propensity for offensive dynamism, I just made up a word. It's late at night.
It works.
It works. But if we show that, then I feel like that's, you know, got us back on the right track, because, you know, this team was obviously counting on Jock to play such a significant role, and now all of a sudden a cornerstone of this team is gone, and it has to kind of find itself again. And it feels like we've started to do that a little bit. And do you think the players kind of realized how bad it was when Jock went off?
I don't know. That's a good question. But certainly the fact that he didn't go back to the Boomers bench first probably indicated that it was pretty serious. Gorge did say in the post-game press conference that whilst he had not had a chance to actually speak with Jock yet, he did know Jock was obviously extremely upset, and he did know the group was very upset for him. But their collective resolve is so strong that they are still preparing as if they're going to go out and win a gold medal.
Yep.
And obviously the way they're going to do it changes, as I spoke about earlier. But this team has such great belief in themselves as a group that they still have that mentality, and that's what they're striving for.
I want to talk about some bright spots from this game in particular. Matisse Thybulle was 5 of 6 from 3. He was probably the story offensively. It was great to see him stroke it from outside and, you know, be a guy that could contribute 17 points in international play, which is a lot more than you would expect from a player who is there for primarily his defensive ability.
Yeah, and absolutely. And my good friend Roy Ward of The Age coined him Molten Matisse, because he seems to love shooting the ball in fever play, and he shot it particularly well in Tokyo, and he's shot it pretty well from deep all week here in Melbourne. So there's something to that, and you're right, that just helps to spread the floor a little bit more, and give this offense another look, another dimension, which they've needed at times when other people have been struggling. So it just adds to the depth on the wing. Interestingly, though, Gorge was pretty adamant tonight that Matisse is not going to start when the real games commence, and he wants to start Josh Green at that 3 spot. He said that Matisse's defense is better off ball in terms of reading passing lanes and being disruptive, but Josh Green's on-ball defense, he said it's like Delhi on steroids. That's a direct quote from Gorge, which speaks volumes of his belief in Josh Green's ability to defend on ball. And when you put him in a lineup next to the likes of Josh Giddey and Paddy Mills, who, let's be honest, are more known for their offensive prowess than their defensive prowess, that becomes really important against some of these teams that they're going to face over in Okinawa, who do have some strong guards, the likes of Dennis Schroeder, for example, some of the Japanese guards. And then obviously, when they get to the second round, facing a Luka Doncic, and when you throw a Josh Green, obviously his teammate, but between Green and Thybulle as a two-man combination on Luka, that's going to really help to slow him down. But he needs to see a bit more out of Josh Green. He obviously hasn't played until tonight this week, but he did like what he saw. He thought he was a bit passive offensively, which is probably understandable. But he has a really strong ability to play both ends of the floor. And I think he just likes that combination of on-ball smarts alongside those other players that he's likely to start.
I was almost willing to give Josh Green a bit of a pass, given it was his first game of the week and a bit of time off. I think with how sloppy the Boomers in parts looked against Venezuela, even winning by 56 points, you do have to kind of give them a loosener. I want to talk about Xavier Cooks as well, because he seems to be growing into his role on this team the more that he's on the floor for this team. He was 5 for 5, 11 points. He had 3 boards, a steal and a block. So he's contributing across the box score as well. And at the start of the week, I did say couldn't catch a cold, really. Whenever the ball was thrown his way, it would go through his hands. And that's just symptomatic of a guy that hasn't been on the floor with this team for very long. Xavier Cooks is a world-class player and a former NBL MVP, and we knew that he would get his sea legs under him, I think I said in the previous episode, and he has done that in spades and really repaid the faith. And, he looks very dangerous at international level.
He really does. And I think you're right. I think for him, it's just a comfort thing because it is quite a different style of play to what he's been used to. And let's not forget that Xavier hasn't played at a major FIBA tournament before. He made the 2019 team and then obviously got injured right before and couldn't go over to China. So this is going to, be a little bit of an adjustment for him. It's obviously very different to what he played in the NBA in that last little patch with the Washington Wizards as well. But he's really grown into his role, and I think that's going to be now amplified with the loss of Jock Landale. But you're right, he's given them some great minutes these last 2 games on both ends of the floor. He just knows how to be in the right spots, make the right reads. He's so super active on the O boards, and he's that real connector offensively as well, which really helps with some of those small ball lineups, especially.
I want to finish by talking about Paddy Mills. He's kind of been under the pump a little bit on the commentary of the games, and hasn't necessarily had the best preparation for the World Cup. Are you at all concerned about Paddy's production, his ability to be able to get into these games as we get closer to tournament time and in group play? Because it does feel like he's struggled from the field this week in Melbourne, and that's okay because we know he's world class and he can come back at any time. But is there any concern from you about his production?
Look, he hasn't looked his sharpest at times this week, but given what he's done over the course of his career, especially when he puts on that green and gold jersey, I don't have any concerns. And you could see tonight there was a real emphasis to try and run a lot of plays for him just to get him some of those reps in terms of where he needs to be with this group, because it is a slightly different group and some different looks than what they had in Tokyo. So no, I think it's just a comfort thing, getting a feel for it and getting sharper. And that's why they play these games. That's why they play these warm-up games. Especially to start to just get a bit more cohesive and get into game rhythm. And they've got 2 more warm-up games as well, as I said, when they get over to Tokyo before they head down to Okinawa. And he'll just get sharper with each of those as well.
He certainly will. So the Boomers go 2-1 across this week. Just briefly, Brazil went 3-0. I have to think that they're the big winners out of this week, and they go into their group with Spain, fully confident of being able to take out second place. And, they're going to give Spain all they can handle in this group as well.
Yeah, no doubt they will. And I think the other big winners, and I want to give them a shout out, is the South Sudan team.
Totally.
Because this is a really young nation, an even younger basketball program. And the fact they even qualified for the World Cup is a story in and of itself. But they've put their best foot forward this week, and they just keep getting better and better. And Gorge actually gave them a particular shout out in the press conference as well, just in terms of what they're doing. And also just some pride as an Australian in terms of the role that we've played in developing that South Sudanese basketball program. The number of players who've grown up in Australia and now, representing that country, the role the NBL has played in their development as well. But I think, and someone put this on Twitter earlier, I think it was Jackson McDonald, like everyone in Australia should really be adopting South Sudan as their second team when the World Cup starts. Let's get behind the Bright Stars, as they call themselves. And it's just a great story. And for mine, I'm absolutely rooting for them to do really well when they get over to Manila.
I tipped them in the group previews to finish second in Group B as really more of a heart pick over a head pick. But, they've got every chance of pinching a game against China, Puerto Rico, or both of those sides. Serbia will be a different proposition altogether. But they play with so much spirit, and they clearly, growing, as you say, as a nation and as a team. And what Luol Deng has done there to put that team together and to get it to a place where they're able to compete in the World Cup is nothing short of extraordinary. And I think they need to have praise heaped upon them for the resilience they've shown and their ability to make noise in this tournament. I think there will be a lot of NBL fans that are really accustomed to a lot of the players on the South Sudanese team that will be cheering them every step of the way. So they'll have a lot of fans in this country as well. Well, Tom, that about wraps up our coverage from Melbourne. The next time we talk to you might indeed be in Japan. So safe flight. Enjoy your time in the group tournament, and thanks for joining me post the victory tonight.
Always a pleasure, Mr. Webster. Thanks for having me.
That was the Podium Pod, the podcast covering the 2023 FIBA World Cup. We will see you again next time.